Hey everyone, I hope you all are doing good and having a wonderful day. In this video, I'm going to show you a very interesting way to bypass IDOR security mitigation. Okay, but as always, before diving deep into this video, if you haven't checked out my previous video on IDOR, then go ahead and check it out. The link of the video is given in the description, as well as you can see it at the right side of the screen. And now, with that being said, let us get started. Okay, so as you can see, we are at the application right over here, and on the left side I have created this very small lab just to show you guys how this vulnerability happens. Okay, and in obviously in real world scenarios as well, we are going to use this same step to identify this vulnerability. Okay, so let's try to go ahead and quickly log in into the application. So the user here is user@bpractical.tech, and then the password is password. We're going to turn on the intercept because we'll be analyzing each and every request. Here's the request, and here's the request and the parameters. We'll send into repeater for the request. Sorry, it's user one actually. So let's do user one. Let's just send this to repeater, forward this, and as you can see, we are successfully logged in. Okay, now obviously, as we all know from the previous video, what we want to do is we want to find a functionality which is dealing with our unique identifiers. Okay, so that we can try to manipulate it and get like an IDOR. Okay, so we'll try to browse the application like a normal user, and for example, we're going to click on my profile over here, and you can see there's this interesting API endpoint, right? A request getting sent from the client. We'll send this to repeater as well, and I would like to intercept the response of it as well. Okay, so intercept the response. We can clearly see that we are getting some user data over here, right? So this is an interesting potential for vulnerabilities, right? So we'll go to repeater and we'll send the request. Okay, as you can see, we are getting the data. Now the first thing that will come into your mind is that if there's an endpoint looking like this, profile/1/show, which basically means that this one could be the user identifier, right? So changing it to any other numerical value might help us in getting the data of the other user, right? So let's try to change this to from 1 to 2. Okay, and send the request. Let's see what happens. And as you can see, the moment we hit this request, we are getting this message that you're not authorized to view this profile. Now many people, especially those who are beginners and who don't know much about how to find IDORs, they will be stopped right at this particular stage. Okay, because we can see that there's this message, and they'll probably move on to a different vulnerability, right? But here you can see that there is a very interesting trick, or you can say method, through which we can still find this or bypass this kind of mitigation, security implementation. What you simply need to do is, and obviously this depends if the application is actually vulnerable or not. Okay, so what you simply need to do is you need to go at the end of the endpoint, okay, something like this, and then you simply need to append this particular value. Okay, because see, most of the REST API endpoints, they are dealing with JSON data. Okay, so there is a high possibility, and even we can see in the previous response that we are getting a JSON data, right? Applications/JSON, right? So what we basically want to do is we want to see if appending .json over here results in something different or not. So if I appended .json, click on send, the response contains the detail of the second user. And since we all know that this is not very random, this is just an incremental value of a single digit number. So what we can do is we can do like a brute force, and we'll get user detail of all the other user. So by just appending .json, we are able to see data of other user, right? Now you might be wondering that, okay, I've understood this is fairly easy to understand how we should be bypassing it. Use .json and this will work. But the main thing for us, for a security researcher, to understand why this vulnerability is happening at the first place, and even if you're a developer, you should understand why this kind of vulnerability is happening at the first place, right? So let's try to look into the source code, and let's try to analyze what is happening over here. Okay, so as you can see right over here, this is the code. Basically this is the code which is handling the profile update functionality. Let's try to understand what is happening over here. Okay, first thing first, if you take a closer look and if you scroll down to this router parameter function, okay, you can see that there are a lot of conditions written. First is that if there is no session, which means that if you're sending the request without properly authenticated, you'll get this message and you'll get the status code which is 401 unauthorized, right? Which is what we can confirm. Let's just change this, remove this from here and remove this as well, just for the demonstration. Click on show. You see we are getting this same method, authentication required, which is what is written in the function. Okay, then what it is doing is that it is converting the string id into integer, right? And then if, like for example, if you are providing a random user id or something which is not an integer, you are going to get this particular error, right? We can verify that as well. Let's go and we'll change this to, let me just remove, and let's change it to, let's say 1 or any string value. You'll see we'll get this particular error, invalid resource id, because here the value, whatever value we're giving over there, is getting converted into integer. If not, then this can lead to a different vulnerability, which we'll discuss in a different video. Okay, and then we have this function, okay, which is user find by id. So whenever you're providing something, is checking if the user is there or not. If the user is not present, you'll get this error, user not found. And then we have this particular check, okay, which is that if request path end with show, if the id is not equals to this id, then you need to mention that you're not authorized to view this profile. Okay, now this is what is checking whether you're authorized or not. And the issue with this particular check is that it is always checking the end value, the last point of the endpoint, the url. Okay, for example, the last point here is /so, and when this value gets fed into the function, it is just checking this particular value. Why it is checking this value? Because this is the last value of this whole endpoint, right, of this whole uri, correct? That's why it is checking it. You can see here is this function ends with, and that's the reason why we are getting 403. The reason when you do show.json and we are able to see the data is very interesting. So if we go and let me show you this. So when we do this, what happens is that the last part of the URI becomes show.json, right? Which is, and when the values goes inside this particular condition, this will not apply to this URL, because now the path is not ending with show, it is ending with show.json, right? And this is the reason why this whole thing is going to be skipped, and then we'll move to a new function directly. Okay, and even before that, you see we are actually fetching the user id directly. Okay, so we have the user id, then like we are fetching the data, then we are validating whether this particular url is ending with show or not. If it is ending with show, then we are validating the user id. If it is not ending with show, then what we want to do is we want to move to the next function, and the next function over here is these two functions. So router get show, which is basically what we were seeing before when we are not applying .json, and this is router show.json, and this is what is happening. Now you may be thinking that why people or why the developer might be using .json. The reason is actually very simple, that it's not like the application is developed in a single day. There are a lot of phases, testing phases, integration phases, new module testing, and a lot of things. So basically all the application goes into some sort of a software development life cycle, right, in which you have to test, deploy, and do the things back and forth again. So when the application is huge, and when new things are getting integrated and more the application becomes more and more complex, developers often create these kind of functionalities that can help them to track everything easily. So instead of just going back and forth with the authentication, all they can just simply use show.json and we'll be able to see the data. The issue happens is that when they deploy this same code into the production, so as long as it is in development and the development server is hidden inside the local network, it's fine. But when you push it to production, and if something like this happens, this leads to a critical vulnerability. I hope you guys have understood this. If you have any doubts, if you have any issues, feel free to let me know your doubts or issues in the comment section. And now, with that being said, keep learning, keep hacking, and thank you so much for watching this video.